What's up, guys and gals of the movement world? It's Shawn, Myszka, Movement Master and OptimizeMovement.com, coming with another movement lesson. And in today's movement lesson, we're going to discuss a concept that if you followed my work here on Movement Mastery at all, you've definitely heard me mention more than on one occasion. However, I want to bring some clarity to this concept and its ideas so that everyone is on the same page regarding what it means. The concept that I'm referring to here today is that of repetition without repetition. In fact, I feel it is so important that if I were to summarize not only what I do within my own practice methods for enhanced movement skill acquisition for my athletes, but also what I feel is the key to seeing this movement practice lead to skill that is not only retained but also transferred out onto the field for my athletes, it would be conveyed by those three words: repetition without repetition. So this snippet of this quote, at least for me, can really be traced back to the work of a movement behavior scientist that we have all talked about here at many times on Movement Mastery, the late and great N.A. Bernstein. Bernstein felt, when defining the processes of practice for movement skill acquisition or refinement, that practice must always consist of a search for more optimal movement solutions to the appropriate problems that individuals would find in the context of their world. If this context just so happened to be an athlete in the open environment, having to sense and perceive, read and recognize, anticipate and react to opponents under chaos, anxiety, fatigue, and pressure, then success in the activity truly came down to matching the movement solution to the particular problem at hand. And in this way, sport movement, or really any movement pattern for that matter, is context dependent. And because of this then, properly undertaken practice in Bernstein's view did not involve rote repetition, where an individual will repeat a given movement solution over and over again. Instead, it was about truly solving that movement problem with a more fully matched solution with more optimally executed movement patterns from rep to rep. He then coined this practice as being a type of repetition without repetition. And he said this all the way back before his death in 1967, and it was so eloquently put and portrayed that it's what I still use as a guide to many of my movement theories and ideas to this day. If you think about what this means to you in the way that you may design practice activities or the overall structure of your movement practice as a whole, it's really of no fault to you if you are guilty of violating these ideas. You know, the opposite of this repetition without repetition would be that of repetition after repetition, or repetition by rote. And it is in this way that we have often been fed as a profession, as in an industry, and a craft, and a group of individuals who are passionate about this, to improve or perfect motor performance. And in fact, if we just look at acute motor performance, rote repetition may in fact be the way. However, if we begin to separate motor performance and motor output at that given moment in time from that of motor learning and movement skill acquisition, which is really what most of us should probably be after or desire at most times of the year, we may immediately see huge limitations regarding both retention as well as transfer to the context of the performance environment from a rote repetition style. Granted, I must make the mention that we must match our movement practice activity and our structure difficulty to that of the level of movement mastery that our athletes possess. Thus, if your athletes happen to reside at a low level of movement mastery, our practice structure probably can and should allow them to gain attunement to their biomechanics, and the overall movement execution should be performed in more simpler, more predictable type tasks, typically represented by more rote repetition practice styles. However, soon thereafter, as athletes begin to move up in levels of movement mastery and begin to actually acquire skill, the task difficulty must also begin to change to include the use of an environment that looks, feels, and behaves much like that in which the athlete must perform in. This means to increase movement skill acquisition here, we can and should include more contextual interference, more specific randomization in both task requirements as well as environmental requirements. And we can also look to change our instructional cues or our feedback schedules and styles. All in all, then, each of these mentioned changes will impact the intentions in the movement planning performed by the brain, the attention of the sensory and perceptual systems of the athlete, and then the subsequent calibration of the biomechanics, which will be used to carry out the actual movement solution. And this combination then of these things, of course, is what I've come to refer to as the biodynamic structure of that sport movement skill. The athlete's particular coordination, control, and organization of a movement solution per the requirements of that peculiar movement problem. From there, it should not be understated then that each of those changes that we mentioned above that we could make to the practice structure also will impact post-movement execution processes by the athlete, meaning how the athlete will interpret the success of their solution regarding the execution carried out, also known as the knowledge of the performance. On top of that, how well that solution matched the particular task goal, or also known as the knowledge of the results. Put another way, we can begin to arm the athlete with greater error detection and correction capabilities by practicing in this repetition without repetition type fashion. Which is why I feel that even in sports which appear to have a relatively reoccurring problem with a relatively repeatable solution, we should not discredit the potential benefits of a repetition without repetition type of model. I feel pretty strongly that this type of model results in a biodynamic structure of that movement skill and solution that is not only more stable, but also more flexible to the ever-changing problems of the sport. And I feel that this makes the movement skill and its patterns much more functional and transferable in my mind. Furthermore, the other reality of sport movement coordination and control that I believe Bernstein's repetition without repetition type idea begins to speak to is that of movement variability and its causes and effects for the biodynamic structure of the athlete. Meaning, even in relatively pre-planned type activities, those that exist across all ends of the simple to complex spectrum of movement organization. No two problems will ever be exactly the same, and thus the movement solution that is optimally matched to solve that problem will differ in at least subtle ways, even for the most masterful of mover. Our practice containing a repetition without repetition type of structure will again give that athlete awareness to this reality of movement variability and how to control for it. So even if technique itself cannot be constant, maybe because the perception or the information that guides the movement has changed, or maybe because the athlete themselves and their characteristics are changed in some way, the athlete who is practiced in this repetition without repetition type of fashion can still account for those differences because of their enhanced attunement to both gross and fine factors, which will impact the coordination and the control of an emergent movement pattern, and thus more fully realize the highest potential of movement performance and outcome. So then, in conclusion, hopefully this video will essentially allow you to kind of see where I'm coming from here and elaborate or expand upon your previous thoughts to give you a better idea as to what a practice schedule or structure that involves repetition without repetition means, as well as maybe why I believe in this application and mention it so frequently and so damn much. You know, I owe this idea to Nikolai Bernstein as well as others who have kept it alive in some way, shape, or form. such as Paul Glazier and Carl Newell and Keith Davids, among many others. But its influence, that influence of repetition without repetition here at Movement Mastery, as well as in my own movement practice philosophies, truly cannot be understated. So for another movement lesson, this has been Shawn Myszka, Movement Mastery, and OptimizeMovement.com. I'll talk to you guys on the flip side. Until then, let's continue to master the art of optimizing movement.